Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with our Friday ramblings for the month of March. I am busting out my fancy super short spring cut because when you come on to a new season, you got to make sure you got a fresh new look. That's right. We've got a bit of a new do, and we've got new videos discussing your favorite bits and pieces of pop culture. We're going to have ourselves a little bit of fun as we are going to make fun of one of the least beloved WCW pay-per-view series. Like many people in professional wrestling, WCW came across the idea of having annual pay-per-view themes, where each year in that given month, the pay-per-view would carry the same name and have a general theme matching that name. WWE uses this very thoroughly. In fact, they do it exclusively now, although very few of their pay-per-views have a tight theme. Mostly it's the classic ones like your Royal Rumble, Survivor Series. Some of the newer ones that have them are TLC, in which there's always at least one TLC match. The Elimination Chamber, same idea. It's the only time of the year they do the Elimination Chamber match. But we're not talking about WWE, we're talking about WCW. And WCW did have several themed pay-per-views that they did year after year. This one is one that started in the mid-90s and is Uncensored. Now, immediately that name sounds a little oddball to you because pay-per-views are by their nature uncensored. That was one of the big points of pay-per-view wrestling, is the matches are going to be a little more intense and anything goes because, hey, they're not restricted by TV formats and FCC guidelines. Only good taste in what their audience would put up with in the name of shock tactics and desperation booking. In this case, though, Uncensored is a play on the fact that allegedly this pay-per-view featured matches in which the fictional WCW Board of Directors did not sanction any of the matches, i.e., they had no say in the matches, the match results, what happened at the event. And more importantly, because this is the kind of the whole purpose of claiming a match is unsanctioned in wrestling, is that any excessive injuries that may occur, the WCW company cannot be held liable. Unfortunately, this brings up a few storyline logistical issues from the get-go. Specifically, why would you sit there and sell a pay-per-view full of unsanctioned matches? The idea is that as a company, you disassociate from them. It's one thing to put one unsanctioned match on a pay-per-view or a TV series. It's another to do a whole series based around it. Mostly because the immediate question becomes, if you've got so many things going on in your company that are so chaotic and out of control, and you are so incapable of regaining control that you need a whole card and a whole night's worth of officially unofficial violence to get it all out of people's systems, you must not be a very good administrator. You know, again, once a year or so, you got two guys that are just so personally hateful against each other that you know their match is going to get out of control, so you just kind of sit there and say, look, legally we wash our hands of this, you guys do whatever you got to do. We're going to put it on TV just because, you know, it's all we can think to do to make something positive out of this situation. It's a whole nother thing to go, look, our entire company is out of control, so we're going to have a whole night full of these matches. that just makes you guys look bad, especially when you do it year after year. If it had been done as a one-off thing, Uncensored probably would have been, easy enough to work around those few logical plot holes. But once you started doing it 2, 3, 4, 5, in fact, 6 years in a row, it kind of takes the whole this is very real and this is very uncontrollable aspect out of it, because, oh wow, we can coincidentally just have all this going on at the same time every year. Yeah, no. Not unless your company is completely out of your control all 12 months a year, and you just, figure, it's a good time of year, we got a lot of money left laying around, we'll just let these guys do whatever they want, who cares? Actually, WCW did have a pay-per-view where they're willing to piss money away, but that's a different one, and that's a different video. You old school wrestling fans know what I'm talking about. Vroom, vroom. The other big continuity plot hole is if these matches are unsanctioned and officially do not impact people's win-loss records, how do championships change hands? You couldn't have any championship matches. Since the match isn't sanctioned by the board of directors, it cannot be legally binding once it comes time to the results. So how does a championship change hands? Okay, so we just won't book any title matches, except they did. So every year you had title matches that should not have been official, should not have occurred. It's almost like the people running WCW didn't really understand what the concept of unsanctioned meant. And it was just a marketing buzzword. Why, that would just plain be silly. So, with that in mind, let's give you a quick rundown of what occurred at each 6 of these events. Because yes, it did occur 6 times, from 1995 through 2000. Although there was a pay-per-view in 2001 before the WWE buyout at the same time of year that Uncensored would normally be done, most of the pay-per-views in 2001 were renamed one-offs. In this particular case, this would be Greed, which was, for you trivia folk references, was the last pay-per-view for WCW, as it took place 3 days before the final episode of Thunder and 8 days before the final episode of Monday Nitro, thus taking place in the last 10 days of WCW's existence as a separate entity. So, they hadn't sat there and gone with the whole one-off pay-per-view renaming thing those last few months, WCW Uncensored came this close to being the last pay-per-view. But oh well. Trust me, their legacy's awkward enough without that record. Now, it should also be noted that Hulk Hogan was featured in the main event of all 6 versions of the event, and that the only real logic behind this whole unsanctioned, uncensored buzzword marketing gimmick is that it allowed the pay-per-view to justify featuring more gimmick matches than usual. Of course, by the late 90s, gimmick matches had become so commonplace, both on TV and in pay-per-view. The idea of an all-gimmick match pay-per-view really didn't make it a money-making idea anymore. 1995, that was kind of innovative. By 1999 and 2000, it was basically business as usual. It was actually harder on the writers to come up with more gimmick matches since they were throwing gimmick matches all over the place. But that was the Monday Night Wars for you. So, also, real quick, I'm sorry, I know I said we were going to break down the cards, but I keep finding stuff I want to throw at you for people that are completely unfamiliar with the concept. The reason The reason we are discussing this pay-per-view right now is because WCW Uncensored was, for its 6 years of existence, the official WCW pay-per-view of March. And we are launching March. While pay-per-views generally occur in the back half of the month, we're going to discuss its first episode of the month because that's how I roll. And because we didn't really do any wrestling talk in February, so I'm going to pay back my wrestling fans who have had to wait a little bit longer than some to hear me talk about what goes on between the ropes. So, real quick, 1995 was the inaugural uncensored pay-per-view event for World Championship Wrestling. Took place on March 19th, 1995 from the Tupelo Coliseum in Tupelo, Mississippi. Tupelo had been a major market for wrestling for many years, so it was a good place to put a pay-per-view on. For the pre-shows, we had Alex Wright defeating Mark Starr, Steve Austin defeating Tim Horner, and the team of Stars and Stripes, which was Marcus Bagwell and Patriot, defeating Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck, who were managed by Colonel Robert Parker. On the official pay-per-view, we got our fun time gimmicky matches, kicking off with the Blacktop Bully, who is of course played by Barry Darsow as one of his many gimmicks in WCW. Barry Darsow is more known for his WWF runs as Smash of Demolition and the Repo Man. He defeated Dustin Rhodes, a.k.a. The Natural, a.k.a. Goldust, a.k.a. Black Rain, a.k.a. Cody's brother that can't get the push he really deserves in AEW because God knows why. They competed in the first and only King of the Road match. The idea of it was that they fought on the back. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is just, I can't say this with a straight face. They fought on the back of a semi-truck. Like, they took the sides off the truck and just had like a little framework of the truck. And like a bunch of hail bays and other just rando blue collar looking stuff on the truck. And the idea was they had to wrestle from the back of the truck to the front of the semi storage part, and the winner of the match was the one who rang the bell, which in a traditional wrestling match, I kind of would have made sense. Ringing the bell is, how you begin and end a match. But it wasn't like a ring bell that, ding, ding, ding. It was like a bling, ding, 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 church bell thing in minute, Part of the absurdity of the match is helped by the fact that they filmed it in advance and clearly had problems actually wrestling the match and filming it because the truck was like moving. It was driving up and down the freeway and not, outside of, well, I don't know if they filmed in Mississippi or if they did it near the corporate headquarters in Atlanta. I've heard Atlanta, but I'm not going to swear to it because I wasn't there at the time. But either way, they filmed it while the truck was in movement, and anybody who's ever just been riding in the back of a pickup truck when it's moving knows it can be hard to stay on your feet, let alone a big old commercial truck going highway speeds. So because of that and the various editing they had to do and the fact that they apparently didn't want to take more than one day to do it, you can actually see the time jumping back and forth due to the position of the sun, making it look like they were driving so fast they were in a time warp. As I said, there's a reason that they only did this match once ever. Ever. It looked goofy, it was dangerous for the wrestlers involved, and it did nothing to get Barry or Dustin over. And it was not some quick little 5-minute thing either. This match ran for 13 minutes. Next up, we had Ming, also known as Haku, who defeated Jim Duggan in a martial arts match which featured Evil manager Sonny Onu as special guest referee. This was one of those early attempts by professional wrestling to try to leech in some of the just beginning prototype MMA fans and hype going on. There's really nothing much to say about it except the match looked ridiculous because clearly nobody putting the match together really understood what made martial arts matches fun to watch when they're legitimate. So having a scripted one put together by people that hadn't really been in them, it was goofy. Speaking of goofy, Johnny B. Bad, who was later known in WWE as Mark Marrow, defeated Arn Anderson, the legendary enforcer, in a boxing match. It went 4 rounds. Again, people who are not professional boxers, although Mark Marrow did have a background in boxing, so he kind of sort of knew what he was doing, but he was at the will of the bookers who didn't really know what they were doing. Any idiot that's ever watched a real boxing match could watch this and tell it was not legitimate, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. Our next 2 matches were actually standard rules matches, which again, why would you bother? When Randy Savage defeated Avalanche, better known as Earthquake from WWE, by disqualification, a whole pay-per-view that's unsanctioned and somebody wins by DQ. Followed by Big Bubba Rogers, who would later go on to more fame in WWE as Big Boss Man, defeating Sting, who we all know Sting. Oh God, AEW, please don't break Sting in half. Please don't break Sting in half. Sorry. Finally, in a false count, or not finally, but next up in a false count anywhere match, the Nasty Boys defeated Harlem Heat. Both 2 very legendary teams capable of putting on great matches when, there's something good going on. Although I'll be honest, simply because the Nasty Boys were a great example of an early hardcore brawling team, on a relative perspective, this was the best match on the pay-per-view. Should be noted that Harlem Heat was managed at this time by Sister Sherry, who was the iconic Sherry Martel. However, despite them having Sherry in their corner in a match where she probably could have gotten physically involved, nobody would have noticed or cared, as far as disqualifications went, Nasty Boys did win. Finally, Hulk Hogan with the Renegade, a.k.a. Ultimate Warrior Bootleg. Like, I'm not even kidding. That was like the whole idea with the Renegade, is they did these vignettes that implied the Ultimate Warrior was coming to WCW. But he never was. He was never under contract. So they had a guy that was kind of similar looking to the Renegade, or to the Ultimate Warrior, but not quite. Put him in some tights and makeup that made him look even closer to the Ultimate Warrior, even though his muscle build was not quite there. And called him the Renegade and acted like, oh yeah, no, Ultimate Warrior who? No, obviously it was the Renegade. Who else would it be? But Hulk Hogan was seconded by the Renegade, who defeated Vader, who was seconded by Ric Flair in a leather strap match. Now this would have been all well and good, except the problem is, because Vader had been a big monster heel before Hogan came into WCW, shortly before Uncensored, and as such, they didn't want to bury him too hard, even though he was booked in multiple pay-per-views against Hulk Hogan, who they had to have win every pay-per-view because he's Hulk Hogan. Vader, seriously, I'm going to say this, and I'm not kidding you. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not doing a bit. Vader lost a strap match, which, by the way, the rules are you beat your opponent down so badly while he's attached, one hand, one of your wrists, one of his wrists by a leather strap, so y'all can never be too far apart from each other, and you also have a, weapon you can smack them with, or choke them with, whatever. But you're supposed to touch all 4 turnbuckles before your opponent touches all 4. Because, again, the whole idea is you beat them down so bad, they can't stop you from doing whatever you want. In this case, showing off how badly they're KO'd by you just taking a little saunter around the ring. So, Hogan wins a strap match against Vader by dragging Ric Flair around the ring and touching all 4 turnbuckles. See, that's the whole point, folks. That is Uncensored in a nutshell. They can't figure out how to get one of these 2 men between Hogan and Vader to agree to lose to the other in a match that already has modified rules, so you can justify, hey, he didn't actually out-wrestle me. He, did dirty-handed things like choking me out. So they, instead of just saying, well, we'll just book somebody else to lose to Hogan from the get-go, they had the only leather strap match in history where you won by dragging somebody who's not your opponent around the ring. Not to mention it was part of the ongoing saga of 1995 and 1996, where Hogan routinely beat up and embarrassed Ric Flair. That's certainly another discussion for another time. But that was their first Uncensored, and they actually kept doing stuff like this. If you have the WWE Network, go ahead and give this thing a watch, but watch it with the intent to heckle it and laugh. The King of the Road match is just... people in our modern era like make fun of the cinematic matches that AEW and WWE do, but the King of the Road is like a whole nother level of just sloppily done. It was a bad idea with horrible editing and just did not work. Again, I will concede, while it would have been nice to see the Nasty Boys and Harlem Heat in maybe a match with some slightly different rules to it, the Falls Count Anywhere match actually was not a bad wrestling match. Just not the best match either team could have had. So this brings us to Uncensored 1996, which once again came from the Tupelo Coliseum. In the pre-show, Mr. JL, aka Jerry Lynn, defeated Dean Malenko. Jim Duggan defeated Big Bubba Rogers. Dick Slater is now going solo and defeating Alex Wright. And the Steiner brothers fought the Nasty Boys through no contest. See, this is what a year's worth of awkward booking can do for you. Multiple people who were in the main show pay-per-view last year are now working the pre-show, not to mention the Steiner brothers, who even in 1995 could have out-wrestled anybody else on this card. And at any point in time, the Steiner brothers should have been on a pay-per-view main show. Should have been a highlighted team. But anyway, going down to it. Conan loses the United States Championship to Eddie Guerrero. I can't really fault this one because Eddie's one of the greatest of all times. Conan himself is a very solid hand. No problem with them having a nice long 18-minute match, except it was uncensored, so, and they were the opening match, so it's not like they were going to be put over as the best match on the card, which they basically were. Lord Steven Regal, known in modern days as NXT General Manager William Regal, defeated the Belfast Bruiser, aka Fit Finlay, by disqualification on an unsanctioned pay-per-view. 17-minute match. Again, any other situations, clean winner or loser, if you just send William Regal and Fit Finlay out there and tell them to do what they do best, they could steal the show. But clearly WCW is not interested in putting them over as the top-tier international talent they were. Next up, manager Colonel Robert Parker. Although, to be fair, Robert Welch was a trained wrestler in his youth, so it's not like he didn't know what he was doing in the ring, but he was not in his physical prime, was defeated by Medusa, a.k.a. Deborah Michelli, a.k.a. Alundra Blaze. Exceptional wrestler, but you've got a woman at a time when women's wrestling was not treated as a very serious thing in America, beating up an old, out-of-shape manager. A guy who your company had always portrayed as being physically incapable of wrestling. So it didn't do anything for her to win this match. And it was less than 4 minutes, so... The Booty Man, a.k.a. Ed Leslie, a.k.a. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, a.k.a. about 15 other WCW gimmicks, defeated a rookie Diamond Dallas Page. Should be noted, the Booty Man at the time was being accompanied by his booty babe, who was DDP's real-life wife, Kimberly Page. I have no idea why they wrestled for 16 minutes. Ed Leslie's never been a great wrestler, and DDP was not at his peak in 1996. It was pay-per-view. They had the time. The Giant, a.k.a. The Big Show, accompanied by Jimmy Hart, defeated Loch Ness, a.k.a. Giant Haystacks, one of the iconic British wrestlers of the 70s and 80s. Problem is, this is 1996. He was, much like Robert Parker, a.k.a. Mr. Welch, past his physical prime. It was only a 2.5-minute match. However, this magically gave the Giant the #1 contendership to the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Sting and Booker T defeated the Road Warriors in a Chicago street fight. I don't care what year it is. If you have the original Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, I don't care who you put them in the ring with. They don't lose street fights. They built their whole reputation as the team that beats up everybody else. That the toughest, nastiest brawlers. And then you call it a Chicago street fight because Chicago was their, in storyline, hometown. In real life, they are gentlemen from Minnesota. They're just, as much as I love Sting and Booker T, there was no reason to have those two go over the Road Warriors. And a street fight should never last 30 minutes. You know. But the biggest insult to professional wrestling on this whole pay-per-view was the 25-minute Doomsday cage match. Later known as the triple stacked cage, where you see Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage defeating 8 other wrestlers who had 3 managers there helping them. Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Ming, the Barbarian, Lex Luger, the Taskmaster, a.k.a. Kevin Sullivan, Z Gangsta, a.k.a. the late Tommy Lister, who was brought in because he had worked a few matches in WWF with Hulk Hogan after the two of them starred in No Holds Barred. So WCW and Hulk Hogan basically just want to recreate Hogan's glory days. Tommy Lister was a wonderful actor and by all reports a good human being. May he rest in peace. And finally, the Ultimate Solution, aka Jeep Swenson, who made a lot more money playing Bane in Batman and Robin. They were all accompanied by Woman, aka Nancy Benoit, may she rest in peace, Miss Elizabeth, and Jimmy Hart. 2 men in a cage match where anything goes, all the weapons in the world can be used, beat 8 men, 4 of who, in Rick, Arn, Ming, and Lex Luger, were top-level talents that should have been portrayed as capable of beating these men. Barbarian and Kevin Sullivan as the Taskmaster were very solid, long-time wrestlers in their own right. You had 3 managers helping them cheat. And you still couldn't... Ugh. It's just bad. It was just bad. Ugh, this match is painful to watch. Three years in. Oh my god. It's getting really hard to maintain my general constructive criticism-ness. And so we're going to start going through these a little quicker, because I really don't want to try to remember a lot of these matches. In the only pre-match show, Ice Train, who was nobody ever, anywhere, defeated Max, aka Max Muscle, who was never anybody anywhere. Dean Malenko finally made it to the main show, defeating Eddie Guerrero once again in a United States Championship match. Great, 19 minutes. Ultimo Dragon, with Sonny Onu, defeated Psychosis. Glacier defeated Mortis, who would go on to more fame as Chris Kanyon. Buff Bagwell defeated Scotty Riggs, who never went on to much fame. Harlem Heat's back with Sister Sherry, and they defeated the Public Enemy, who were great in ECW, but not much great anywhere else. Prince Iukea defeated Rey Mysterio Jr. to retain the WCW World Television Championship. God bless Ray Ray. He can make any match worth watching. And finally, in the main event, Team NWO, which was composed this time of Hollywood Hogan, Randy Savage, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, accompanied by Dennis Rodman, defeated Team Piper, which is Roddy Piper, may he rest in peace, Chris Benoit, very controversial, we're going to save our Chris Benoit discussions for when I have a free couple hours, Steve Mongo McMichael, and Jeff Jarrett, Slapnuts! Along with the third team in this triangle elimination match, Team WCW, which was Lex Luger, the Giant, and Scott Steiner. That's right. Team WCW didn't even get to have 4 members to it. Whole purpose of this triangle elimination match was that had WCW Team won, the NWO would have needed to forfeit all their titles and be barred from wrestling during any WCW event for 36 months, aka 3 years. Ironic in that the company would basically be out of business in 3 years. Had Piper's team won, Piper would have faced Hogan in a steel cage match, and at the NWO, by winning, would have a shot at any WCW championship anytime they wanted. Just bleh. 1998 Uncensored come around, and no pre-show matches this time. Booker T defends his WCW World Television Championship against Eddie Guerrero, who is accompanied by Chavo Guerrero Jr. Juventud Guerrero defeated Conan. Chris Jericho retained his WCW Cruiserweight Championship against Dean Malenko by submission. Lex Luger defeated Scott Steiner. Diamond Dallas Page retained his United States Heavyweight Championship in a 3-way match against Raven and Chris Benoit. The Giant defeated Kevin Nash by disqualification. Newly arriving Bret Hart defeated Curt Hennig, who was accompanied by Rick Rude, by submission in a singles match. And WCW World Heavyweight Champion Sting defeated Scott Hall, who was accompanied by Dusty Rhodes, due to Scott Hall having previously won the World War III Battle Royale, giving him the right to challenge for the title. And in the main event, yes, he had to be in the main event, even though he was not the champion or challenging for the championship. Hollywood Hogan fought Randy Savage, accompanied by Miss Elizabeth this year, to a no contest in a steel cage match. You had a no contest in a steel cage match in which there is no disqualifications by its nature. This is because the Disciple interfered, knocking both referees out, the Disciple being the previously mentioned Ed Leslie, who then promptly stopped Savage from beating on Hogan. Savage then attacked Sting, who interfered on his behalf, and spat at Hogan before leaving the ring. In a proper steel cage match, since Savage was the one that left the ring, he should have been the winner. But apparently you can be disqualified for interference in a steel cage match, but only on Uncensored. Because a match that normally doesn't have any rules suddenly has rules now on a night that's supposed to be unsanctioned. Ugh. 1999, Billy Kidman retained his Cruiserweight Championship over Mikey Whipwreck. Stevie Ray defeated Vincent in a street fight for leadership of the NWO B Squad. Because at this point the NWO had so many members, they had basically 2 sub-stables. Kevin Nash defeated Rey Mysterio Jr., Jerry Flynn defeated Ernest Miller and Sonny Ono, and nobody cared. Hack, who is normally known as the Sandman, defeated Bam Bam Bigelow and Raven in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko defeated Curt Hennig and Barry Windham to win the WCW World Tag Team Championships. Perry Saturn defeated Chris Jericho in a dog collar match. Booker T defeated Scott Steiner for the WCW World Television Championship, and in a barbed wire steel cage first blood match. Seriously, how many stipulations do you need in one match? For the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, Ric Flair defeated Hollywood Hogan via pinfall, and also became president of WCW. Because it's not enough to just win a championship. For reference, Hogan, if he had won, would not have been president. He would have forced Flair to retire, which might have been better off for Flair if you look at the last year or so, or 2 years of WCW. Last year, folks, here we go. The Artist, the former Prince Iaukea, defeated Psychosis for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. Norman Smiley and the Demon, formerly known as the Kiss Demon, defeated Lenny Lane and Rave, formerly known as Lodi, in a tag team match. Bam Bam Bigelow defeated The Wall by disqualification. Brian Knobbs defeated 3 Count in a handicap match for the WCW Hardcore Championship, held by 3 Count. Billy Kidman and Booker T defeated Harlem Heat 2000, Big T, a.k.a. WWE's Ahmed Johnson, and Stevie Ray. Then Pyro defeated Fit Finlay in a Falls Count Anywhere match. The Harris Brothers, who definitely deserve their own episode for how often they've bounced around promotions and changed gimmicks, defeated the Mamalukes, a.k.a. Big Vito, and Johnny the Bull, a.k.a. Johnny Stamboli, making the Harris Brothers the WCW World Tag Team Championship. Dustin Rhodes defeated Terry Funk in a bull rope match. Sting defeated Lex Luger in a lumberjack match. Sid Vicious defeated Jeff Jarrett to retain the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. And in a Yapapai Indian strap match, which is just a regular strap match, they just gave it a goofy name, Hulk Hogan defeated Ric Flair, which means, yes, folks, Uncensored came full circle. Because Vader beat Ric Flair, or Hulk Hogan beat Ric Flair in a strap match. which, if you recall, occurred back in the original Uncensored in 1995. Gave it a special name this time, but it still happened. At least this time Ric Flair was actually in the match instead of losing on behalf of Vader. So, there's WCW Uncensored. Over 6 years, you have maybe 4 matches worth watching? Or at least remembering fondly. You have matches that could have been great, but were hampered by the nature of Uncensored, and you have a whole bunch of crap. A whole bunch of stuff that just dragged the pay-per-view down. But, positive note is, at least the wrestlers were well paid. We can always say that about WCW. They paid their wrestlers well. And many of them would go on to greater heights, such as Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Booker T, and some just kind of kept riding out their already legendary career, like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. For now, though, we're going to give it a goodbye. I'm going to have me a little drink. I'm not going to show the label because I'm not endorsed. Don't worry, folks. It is a non-alcoholic drink. I do not record and drink because, as you've seen in this episode, my tongue is already crazy enough as it is and fond of fumbling. I don't need any help on that note. But we're going to be back in 7, as we are every Friday, for another rambling. It's going to be a treat. It's not going to be any more wrestling because I do like to keep things varied up during the month. But we are in March. Spring is sprung. And there is going to be some green on the scene. See you soon, folks.